Da-da-da-da.
Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Weekly Pick'em Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Pick'em Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care Technologies. To find out more about the future of sports medicine, go to the top of thegruelingtruth.net and click on the banner. I'm your co-host for the NFL Weekly Pick'em Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Brian Schmidt. How you doing, Schmitty?
Doing better than some of these defensive linemen in the NFL right now.
Oh, and, I mean, part of the problem here is Tony Pike, because he was a quarterback. How you doing, Tony?
Oh, I wouldn't say. I mean, now that we got quarterbacks flopping like we saw Roethlisberger do last night, this has hit an all-time low. Something better be done about the
he got hit on the head really hard, though, Tony.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he'll probably be in concussion protocol this week. But as a quarterback, it's not that far-fetched to think that some of these guys are going to start flopping a little bit in order to get these calls.
Yeah, it's going to look like the NBA.
Might as well.
All of a sudden. I mean, and you know what? My first thought on this whole thing is it's getting so ridiculous with these calls. Either one of you think maybe the officials are just going to call it every chance they get, so it gets so ridiculous that maybe the NFL will then clarify the rule?
I don't know. I just know this, that it's come to a point where for us old-timers like me and Mike, we remember back in the 90s when Tagliabue was the commissioner, and they came out with I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I remember this interview of him coming out saying, we want to make the game safer without changing the game of football. And now we look, 20-some-odd years later, we have completely butchered that idea.
Yeah, and Tony, the kickoff is ridiculous now. I don't know why they just don't give everybody the ball at the 30-yard line.
Yeah, it's the kickoff. Being down in Charlotte for the game Sunday with the Bengals, it really, Dom, when you're at a game and watching it, how useless these kickoffs are. Because if you're watching the game on TV, you're coming back from a commercial, you might not catch everything. But the fact that they still trot 11 guys out there to run down the field when no one's having a chance to return this ball, it needs to stop at this point.
Yeah, and I think where we're at right now with the NFL, with the drop ratings and everything, Tony, is this. I think we're in the juiced ball steroids era of the 1990s for baseball with football. And I think the reason they're protecting the quarterbacks is they think people want to see games that are 45-42.
Yeah, and so that's a point, because you look at the Jacksonville and Titans game this week at 9-6. That's not must-see TV, but to me it gets to a point where you're taking the integrity of the game away. And a guy like Clay Matthews has been fined each week now. That starts to add up. And now, like we've talked about, these quarterbacks are getting bigger and stronger too in this league. And now you're going to be in a situation where it's going to take a few guys easing up or not tackling them fully, and the quarterback extends the play and throws the ball down the field, that you're going to start losing games that way. So it is. I think I agree when players are starting to call the NFL soft. It's certainly getting to a point of that. And to another point, these offensive linemen, I saw a stat this week, the offensive linemen are throwing themselves into these DBs and secondary guys right at their legs, and that's a legal play now, but going after the quarterback's not. It's just there's too many variations of the rule that's going to cause a lot more problems.
Yeah, and I think the other problem is this, and I know the NFL wants everybody to go 8-8, but I mean, we're at a point now where I think there's a total of 4 or 5 teams that are undefeated or winless. So you've got like 80% of the league is 1-2 or 2-1. The Buffalo Bills beat the Minnesota Vikings 27-6 in Minnesota, Brian.
Yeah, I wish I could come up with something for that one. That one was off the radar to even think that would happen. And there's upsets all the time. We see upsets in NFL. We see upsets in college. But there are also just times where you look and you go, boy, how that can't happen. And that was one of those that I was shocked by.
Yeah, so overall, I think what the NFL wants is a bunch of 45 to 42 games where everybody has 7 wins in Week 14 and everybody has a shot at the playoffs. But I'm telling you this, the most exciting the NFL ever was to me as a kid growing up, Brian, was the 1970s or the 1980s. You look at the 1980s, you had super teams, but you had 4 or 5 of them. We don't have that anymore. Right now, it looks like it's the Los Angeles Rams and everybody else.
No, I again, you and I being old timers, I had said yesterday, as a matter of fact, football in the 80s was fun to watch. The NFL in particular was fun to watch. We've just got Sunday. I'll be honest. I was watching Green Bay and the Redskins. That's what was here in North Carolina. And honestly, the moment that they made that call because of too much weight on the quarterback, I literally turned it off because at that point, I couldn't watch it anymore. It took every fiber of my being. It was hard to watch the Pittsburgh game last night, and Pittsburgh's my team. It's just getting different. It's getting harder and harder to watch the NFL because of the way things are being done.
Yeah, and when I get home last night, there's like 5 minutes left in the first half, and in those 5 minutes, Tony, I saw 3 personal fouls on quarterbacks that a year or two ago were not personal fouls on the quarterbacks.
Yeah, the one that stood out to me was Gerald McCoy actually hit Ben Roethlisberger in the chest and didn't even take him to the ground. Gerald McCoy ran right through Roethlisberger, didn't tackle him, didn't fall on him. They still call it. To me, there's too many variations. We saw Aaron Rodgers get taken to the ground, and it looked like he got driven into the ground, and no flag was called. So it's just there's too much confusion with these officials right now that it seems like it's as we've talked now, because this is still a topic as we're entering week 4 of the season. It's still a topic. It's only going to get worse from this point. I don't see it getting better from here on out in the short term.
All right, so let's go ahead and pick the Week 4 games. Hopefully, Schmidt, you're writing them down, right? So Matt Andrews-Gavage cannot be with us tonight. We do have his picks, so we know what's going on there. I'm writing them down, Brian. I'm just kidding. But the first game, Thursday night, is actually another great Thursday night game. We got the Minnesota Vikings, who, of course, are coming off make you shake your head, lost to the Buffalo Bills at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams had a tough game against the Chargers, but won the game by 11 points. Right now, Tony, I would think you would have to say the Rams are the best team in the NFL, even though it's early. You think they continue that role here against Minnesota?
Yeah, I give it Rams, and I had the Chiefs really a close second with that offense. But this one, to me, it's interesting because the Rams offense is so good, but you're losing Talib and Marcus Peters right now in the secondary. Kirk Cousins and company, you got to feel like after that game and the letdown against Buffalo that they're going to come out guns ablaze. And I'm actually going to take the Vikings to upset the Rams here just because I think the Vikings are a hungry team. I think they were embarrassed last week. And I think there's going to be some opportunities against the Rams defense, whereas I think the Vikings defense shows up and tries to prove that they're still one of the top defense in the league.
All right. I want to agree with you. I'm going with the Rams. I just don't like the Vikings offensive line. I'm playing against this defensive line. I think it's going to be rough. And I just don't think – I think maybe Minnesota's not as good as we thought at the start of the year. But I'm just going to take the Rams right now. Brian?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm going to take the Rams. In spite of the NFL and everything that goes on with it, the one team that I actually somewhat enjoy watching is the Rams. Good offense, great defensive line, that can be a dominating factor. They're an enjoyable team to watch. I just don't think Minnesota is going to have enough to win this game down the stretch. I think it'll be a great game to watch, but I think that eventually that the Rams will pull it out in the second half.
All right, next up we got the Houston Texans, who are a surprise 0-3 against the Indianapolis Colts, who are 1-2. But the thing about the Colts is, Schmidt, they could easily beat 3-0. Played Philadelphia tough this last week. Who do you like in this one?
I'm gonna take the Colts. And you know, I don't know if people would consider that an upset or not. I'm gonna take the Colts. The Colts have done enough that I just feel like that they can win this. The Texans, watching them, it seems like they have all the pieces, but the puzzle is just highly jumbled right now. They just haven't really impressed me in games that I really think they should win. So I'm going to take the Colts at home.
All right, Tony?
I'm going to take the Texans this week just because, as you just mentioned, it seems like they have all the pieces to the puzzle. You got J.J. Watt, you got Clowney, you got this defense with Merciless that's supposed to be dominant. And on the other side of the ball, Deshaun Watson took the league by storm last year and really hasn't shown up yet. I think DeAndre Hopkins and him get on the same page this week against a Colts team that I think they're stingy. I think they're tough, but I just don't think they can score that many points to win against this Texans defense.
Yeah, I agree with Tony, Brian. I'm going to go with Houston also just on what I think they should do, which has not been much, but I just think they've got it there. I think Deshaun Watson's a good player. I think this defense is good. And I think the Colts are Andrew Luck, and they're just missing a few pieces yet. Next up, we get the Buffalo Bills at the Green Bay Packers, and last week we just ignored the game when Buffalo played Minnesota, so this time we'll talk about it a little bit. I'm going to take the Packers. I don't think the Packers are a very good football team, but I know the Buffalo Bills aren't, Brian.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Packers. What can you say about the Bills? I'm still scratching my head how they won that game last week. But, yes, Packers at home.
All right, Tony?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Packers, although to me it becomes interesting. We could start betting if Clay Matthews is going to get another roughing the passer this week. But I think this is an interesting game because at some point Green Bay, with when you watch Aaron Rodgers, they have to think about sitting him for a couple games. And I thought with their schedule coming up, this might be a time to do it and hopefully have him healthy for a stretch run. But he just doesn't seem 100% to me. However, I think the Buffalo surprise on the Vikings wakes Green Bay up in their preparation this week, and they're able to take care of business.
All right, next up, we've got, I think, a very interesting game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Chicago Bears. Both teams have been better than anybody expected. Can Khalil Mack slow down Ryan Fitzpatrick? Brian?
This is a tough one.
Yeah, because you don't know if the Bears can score enough points. You know the Bucs, with the receiving weapons they have, are going to put up at least 17 to 20 points, but it's hard to figure out if the Bears can score that many.
Yeah, and you know, here's the thing too is with Fitzpatrick is how much longer does the magic continue? You know, he looked not very good early in that game against Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden in the second half, I mean, he got hot, and let's be honest, you know, Steelers secondary is not very good either. But when he got hot, it was a show to watch. Even with that, I'm gonna take the Bears, and the reason I'm gonna take the Bears is because when Fitzpatrick gets guys coming at him, gets that defensive line coming, he does get uncomfortable. The Bears are, you know, infinitely better in the secondary, and I think the Bears can put at least 3 points better, you know, a 2017 kind of game against Tampa Bay.
All right, Tony.
I feel like I'm going opposite all tonight. I'm going to go Tampa this week. I think when it was astonishing to me last night watching that first half, and you know, I'm on social media and I'm checking all this stuff, and people are just throwing Fitzpatrick under the bus, and he's had arguably some of the best 2 weeks of NFL history. And to see him turn on, I was happy for him to get it going. They came up short at the end, but I'm not sold on Mitchell Trubisky yet in that Chicago offense. I think Tampa with their weapons outside, Mike Evans has been great, Deshaun Jackson and company. But it's eventually going to catch Tampa if they don't get some kind of running game going. I think they do enough this week. Khalil Mack probably has another huge game. But I agree. On the other end, I think Tampa gets by in a 20-17 type of game.
Yeah, I agree with Tony on this one again. I'm not a big Mitchell Trubisky fan either. But I do think the Bears are one solid quarterback away from being the best team in the NFC North. Next up, we have a game that we never thought we would see. That would be the undefeated Miami Dolphins traveling to New England to play the Patriots, who are 1-2 and 2 games back in the AFC East division. When I look at this game, I mean, before we pick this game, this is what I'm going to bring up. I watched Detroit and New England, Tony, and what I saw was a Tom Brady that didn't even really look like he wanted to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I think they had 1 first down in the first half, and that was a Detroit Lions team week 1 against the Jets that looked awful. Now, I'm not impressed with Detroit still, but when you look at this, it's hard because it feels like we're falling into the same trap year after year of is this the Patriots' demise? Is this the end of Brady and Belichick? But out of all the years, man, this just doesn't feel like a normal Patriots team.
Yeah, I think this definitely feels different, Brian. And when you look at it, you've got the possibility of Josh Gordon, but he's a huge question mark. You get Julian Edelman back that will help there. But if they lose this game, they're 3 games back in the division already.
Yeah, it's been rare that New England has had, what we consider somewhat of a big game early in the season in terms of, for their playoff future. This is a big game, but for me, it's hard to go against New England in a game like this until we see that the demise is there. Because every time we've chased that fool's gold many times, and so it's very hard to just chase and say, "Yep, the demise is there," because every time we do, they fool us. So, I'll take the Patriots in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Patriots too, but I don't think it's fool's gold anymore. I think they are starting to show, I don't know if it's necessarily Brady showing the age, but I just don't think this team is as talented as they have been in the past. Tony?
Yeah, I'm with you. I was looking today, in their last 13 that Ryan Tannehill has started for the Dolphins, they're 11-2. Tannehill's been a lot better than people give him credit for. But I think what happens here is the Dolphins look ahead past the Patriots to that Bengals game next week, that vaunted Bengals team. So I think they're going to look past the Patriots.
You're being sarcastic.
Yeah, absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. I think the Patriots win this though at home, backs against the wall. This has every makings of a Bill Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati type of week.
Yeah, I agree. But you never know, because we did watch the Bills just beat the Vikings in Minnesota. Next up, Tony, Detroit at Dallas, which all of a sudden is a much more interesting matchup. Maybe. Yeah,
this to me, this is one of the games I'm not excited about this weekend, just because I'm not sold on the Lions. I think Dallas is in shambles in the receiving corps. At some point, they're going to have to call Dez or someone to come in and control that locker room, because there's no fire at the receiving corps. Teams are just loading the box against Ezekiel Elliott. At this point of the year, though, I think Dallas, if they want to keep their season alive, which is crazy. We're talking about week 4, and we already mentioned teams that are, have to win to keep their season in the right direction. I think that's true for Dallas this week, so I'm going to take the Cowboys at home.
All right, Brian?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Cowboys at home, but even that pick is iffy at best. I don't believe in this Cowboys team, but I don't believe in this Lions team as well. So I'll take the Cowboys being that they're playing at home.
Well, I'm picking Dallas, and I'm picking Dallas because of one simple fact. Detroit is coming off a huge win at home. What was that, Sunday night? Usually teams do not react real well after that. So I'm going to take Dallas. I think Detroit has a little bit of a letdown. Next up, we got a game, Tony, that could be 45-42. We've got the Bengals at the Falcons, and I think the story of this game has to be injuries. The Bengals will be missing Joe Mixon, Preston Brown, of course, Vontaze Burfict still, who's suspended. A.J. Green, Joe Mixon. I mean, Atlanta's missing a ton of guys. And the Falcons have not been playing very well. The thing that would worry me as a Bengals fan is I think this game is more important to the Falcons than it is the Bengals right now.
You know, when I look at this Bengals team, that the game against Carolina was one of the worst tackling games from a linebacking core and safety and Sean Williams that I think I've seen in a long time. Cam Newton and that offense came in knowing that they couldn't throw the ball to their receivers. They just pounded McCaffrey. It was disappointing and demoralizing to see that. Teams are going to continue to attack Drake Kirkpatrick. And when you look at the injury situation, like you said, Joe Mixon's not likely to be out there. I have a hard time believing A.J. Green's going to be out there. We have the John Ross fiasco going on in town right now. Again, no Vontaze Burfict. And when you look at the Falcons now, if the Carolina receivers were able to get open against this secondary, Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Calvin Ridley and company are going to have an absolute field day. I think the Bengals are going to have to score a lot of points, and I don't think they're going to have all their weapons to do that. And then really what's scary for this Bengals team, they better figure out defense soon because the next couple games, yes, they get the Dolphins, but they're looking now on the horizon of the Chiefs, the Saints, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, all coming up. And those are all offenses that are all going to put up points. 3-0. Right, and all offenses that can put up points. So you better figure out how to get off the field on defense. I think this is a tough week for the Bengals and a tough matchup against a Falcons team that's going to be hungry coming off that hard loss to New Orleans.
My question is this. I saw a report today. I forget where I saw it, but they were talking about Paul Guenther, who was the Bengals defensive coordinator the last few years. He came in for Mike Zimmer. But the one thing that stood out to me in what I read here was the fact that Paul Guenther's teams are playing much more aggressive now. And the reason he didn't in Cincinnati is because he didn't really have complete say, that Marvin Lewis had some say and wouldn't let him be as free with his play calling as John Gruden has been.
Yeah, I can honestly, I can see that a little bit. You looked at the John Ross situation last year where he played minimal amount of snaps. And to me, I look at a guy on the defense like Carl Lawson, who had an unbelievable rookie year. He played 20 snaps in that game against Carolina where they couldn't stop the run to save their life. I don't know why Carl Lawson's not able to get snaps at linebacker maybe to fill that void with Vontaze Burfict in running situations or at defensive line. To me, there's a lot of questions going on in that locker room for it being week 3. Yes, they got 2 wins early, but that's against the Ravens and the Colts. Not sold on either one of those teams. So I think this is a telling week here for the Bengals.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I think this all comes back to no matter how much talent this team has until they get a new head coach, nothing's going to change. So I'm going to go with Atlanta also, Tony. Brian?
Yeah, I'll agree. I'm going to go with Atlanta at home, but it really comes down to these are two teams that I think have some question marks, and it'll be interesting coming out of this game to see how these teams go forward. How Cincinnati will go forward, and how Atlanta goes forward, but. In this game, I think it'll be a high-scoring game. I think Atlanta will win.
All right. Next up, we got the New York Jets at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jets lost to the Browns last week. The Jaguars lost to the Titans in a 9-6 game. I think Jacksonville is a far superior team. I think that both teams are going to look to redeem themselves from last week, but I think the Jaguars get it done here, Brian.
Yeah, I agree. Jaguars at home. That was a weird game. Game last week. Jaguars defense played well again, but offensively nothing worked. So there's definitely going to be some redemption here. But I think that Jaguars defense is really good, and I just don't think the Jets are going to be able to put enough points up. I mean, it could be a 10-6 game again, but I think the Jaguars will be on the upper end of that.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, I agree. Jacksonville, to me, is one of the most frustrating teams because you want to buy into Blake Bortles when he has that performance against the Patriots. and then the offense is a completely no-show. But I think this defense is good enough to keep them in every game they play. I think they're going to have a field day against Sam Darnold as a rookie. I think the Jaguars win this one pretty easy.
All right, next up, I think one of the most interesting games of the week, the Philadelphia Eagles will travel to Tennessee to battle the Titans, who I think when we look at this, Tony, Mike Vrabel has done a great job with this team so far.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the early surprises of the year is how Mike Vrabel and former coach of mine, Kerry Combs, is down there on staff, great guy. A big win against Jacksonville. Was Jacksonville a little bit on the high of beating the Patriots, like we said? I just think for me, Carson Wentz had a game to get his feet back under him last week against the Colts. I think he plays much better, and I think they start to take the shape of the world champion team that you saw last year. I'm going to take the Eagles.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really decent game. I like what Tennessee is trying to develop. But in the end, I think just the Eagles will do a little bit too much. I think they'll be better offensively. So I'll take the Eagles.
All right, I agree. We'll make it a sweep there, but I do expect it to be a good game. But like Tony said, I think the Philadelphia Eagles at some point are going to kick it into gear, and I think it's going to come down to Philly and the Rams in the NFC. Next up, we've got the Cleveland Browns, who last week won the first Super Bowl in the team's history, at the Oakland Raiders. What do you think, Brian?
I'm gonna take the Browns. I feel like I'm being crazy, but nothing the Raiders do impresses me. Just don't like the feel, don't like what they do, and anytime I watch the Browns, they do things that make me go, okay, things are starting to change, even if it's slowly. So I'm going to take the Browns in winning one on the road.
All right, Tony?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm taking the Browns as well. Yes, the Baker Mayfield effect is going to carry over. I think that team is totally different when they have Baker Mayfield. I think the guys around him play well. He played well. I was surprised when a young quarterback comes in, you don't expect them to push the ball down the field. You expect them to dink and dunk. But they were throwing seam routes down the field. He was throwing the ball outside. I'm impressed with him. I think Carlos Hyde is impressive, Jarvis Landry. But I think the most underrated part of the Browns is their defense. They played well enough to win against Pittsburgh. They went into New Orleans in the Superdome and put together a winning performance against a team that people are picking to win the Super Bowl. And obviously a winning performance last week. I think their defense does enough, and Baker Mayfield pulls it out.
Yeah, plus I think John Gruden's overrated. I'm going to go with Cleveland also just because I really like Baker Mayfield. And I think this, Tony, I mean, if Baker Mayfield's as good as I think he is, the Cleveland Browns, could be the best team in this division within the next year or two. Am I crazy there?
No, I mean, when you look at the Browns, they should be at worst 2-0-1 right now. Yeah. And there's no way they're an extra point away from winning against New Orleans. They're a field goal away against winning against Pittsburgh. This team could be 3-0, and everyone will be talking about how impressive this defense is. And now Baker Mayfield, but because they're 1-1-1, they're not going to get a lot of talk. If they can put together a win this week against Oakland, I think the perception around Cleveland is going to change a lot in this league.
All right, next up, we get the Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals. Tony?
To me, Arizona's just in shambles. They didn't help Josh Rosen by throwing him into the fire like they did last week. I know it's not the Legion of Doom or the Legion of Boom still with Seattle.
I think Tony just bumped out there. Schmidt,
I think it is.
Who you got?
Yeah, I'll take Seattle. Arizona, as he was saying before he got sniped. Arizona is just in shambles. I think they made a big mistake with how they did Rosen, putting him in that situation. And so this is one that Seattle has enough talent to win, obviously. So I'll take Seattle.
We got Tony back. So, Tony, you're taking Seattle, correct?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Brian never gets sniped off the show. I don't know what's going on. I think Brian pays people to come in and take you guys
Yep.
off.
It is.
I don't know. This is two teams that aren't very good. Russell Wilson's on one team. Josh Rosen's on the other. We'll just call this a sweep. I'll take Seattle also. Next up, we get the New Orleans Saints at the New York Giants. The Giants finally get their first win over the Houston Texans last week. When I look at this game, though, I'm just going with Drew Brees, Tony.
Yeah, this is tough for me. I think that the Saints have been one of the underwhelming stories thus far. I think the Giants found their footing a little bit. They're not facing a good defense in the Saints. Saquon Barkley should be able to get something going. All that being said, though, I still got to take the Saints. I still like that offense way too much with Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Drew Brees.
Yeah, and my biggest swing in picking this game, Brian, is just how bad the Giants' offensive line has been.
Oh yeah, I mean they're a wet paper towel, and I'll take the Saints on the road. I think they've got way too much that the Giants are going to be able to handle, and that offensive line is just so bad. So Saints will win this on the road.
All right, next up, the San Francisco 49ers at the Los Angeles Chargers. I almost said San Diego again. When we look at this, Brian, if you're San Francisco, do you roll with C.J. Beathard? Or is there somebody out there, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Tony, or is there somebody out there you would go get right now?
I think you've got to roll with Beathard at this point. I don't know that there's anybody out there with the exception of, Colin Kaepernick that they would never bring back there, which, that in itself would be a huge story, but I think they'll roll with him. Is my opinion.
All right, Tony, do you agree it's C.J. Beathard, or do you think there's somebody else out there? And my question is this: could you pry Nick Foles away from Philadelphia or Tyrod Taylor away from Cleveland, and would it be worth something to do that?
Yeah, those are. I had three names that I was going to look at. Nick Foles, I think it'd be hard to get him out of Philly. A.J. McCarron, I think, has shown flashes sitting there in Oakland. But to me, the guy that I would go and try to get is Tyrod Taylor. I think if the Browns lose Mayfield at this point for any reason during the season, their season's done anyway. Baker's going to be their guy next year regardless. I think Tyrod Taylor is doable, and the Browns are always looking to make a move and try to stockpile draft picks. To me, it's just the Jimmy G injury. It hurts. Because, you want to see quarterbacks be aggressive, but at the same time, just run out of bounds at that point. He had taken a hit earlier in the game. I know you want to be tough and you want to put this mantra up, but, you're one like you were cutting back against one person. You were cutting back to get tackled. It's a very unfortunate injury because I think he had a bright year coming up. But I would go try to get a Tyrod Taylor for sure. But with that being said, the Chargers still rolling this game.
All right, Brian, you agree, Chargers?
Yeah, I agree, Chargers.
Yeah, I think even with Jimmy G, the Chargers win this game. Next up, Brian, the Baltimore Ravens at your Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a big game now, especially for Pittsburgh here, because they're playing a little catch-up with Cincinnati and Baltimore. And when we look at this, I don't think we really know, if any team, how good they are.
Yeah, we really don't. And I think that's what makes this a hard game. There were times yesterday where Pittsburgh looked really good offensively, defensively. Right now, some issues with Boswell with the kicking game, but there were times where they looked really good. And then there were those other times where not so much. Offensively, not really a lot of problems. I tell you, Connor as a running back he's really been impressive. But defensively, they are so hit and miss. Baltimore, kind of falls in that same category of times looking very hit and miss. They can look good 1 minute, look bad the next. I'm going to take Pittsburgh at home. I think it's going to be another one of those Baltimore-Pittsburgh battles that comes down to the end. I'll take Pittsburgh at home. I'm not 100% on it, but I'll take them just because at home. And you know, a win here gets Pittsburgh kind of back on that roll that they've done so many times before, where they start the season and they look horrible, and then all of a sudden they get a win that, you know, wasn't a great win. Then they, you know, they get a Cincinnati or a Baltimore and they win that game, and that seems to propel them onto a roll. Likewise, if they lose this game, we've seen them where they could end up being 7-9, 8-8.
Tony?
Yeah, everything about me wants to take Baltimore in this game. When you look at Pittsburgh's defense, it's not a defense that strikes fear in you anymore. I know Connor's been great in filling in, but he's still no Le'Veon Bell. But I can never go all in on Baltimore. It's whether it's the Joe Flacco effect, whether it's Terrell Suggs and that defense getting older. I don't know what it is. I still trust Big Ben and Antonio Brown and Juju Smith in, like you said, one of those rivalry games with Baltimore where it's going to be physical, it's going to be tough. I think Pittsburgh wins this one at home.
Yeah, and my question with Baltimore is, can you run the ball on Pittsburgh? And if they can't, Pittsburgh can pin their ears back, come get them. Maybe the pass rush won't be as big a deal. I'm going to make it a three-way sweep for Pittsburgh, even though I hope Baltimore beats the crap out of them. All right, next up, we have another division rivalry on Monday Night Football. The Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, who's been playing out of his mind, at the Denver Broncos. The Broncos lost their first game at Baltimore this past week. Tony, what do you think here?
I have no idea how anyone in this league is going to stop Kansas City offensively. Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins has had a rebirth, it seems, and Patrick Mahomes, not only in the pocket, outside of the pocket. He's such a gifted passer. He's got such a strong arm. Like we've talked about, they just have to get in someone's way defensively, and I think against Denver and Case Keenum, they're not able to put up enough points to keep up with this Kansas City team. And even at some point, they're going to come back down to earth. At some point, they're not going to have an explosive offensive game. But even that, does that look like 24, 28 points? I still don't think Denver can get there offensively.
Yeah, I don't either, but I will give Case Keenum this. Even when he doesn't play well, it seems like he's got his team in a position to win all the time. Brian, you want to make it a three-way sweep for Kansas City?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes is just fun to watch. He makes some throws that are real impressive. So, I'm going to go with you guys. I'll go with Kansas City.
Yeah. So, Tony, do you think Patrick Mahomes is the real deal for sure? I mean, because when you watch him, the question is always, once, defensive coordinators get some film on him, do things change? Because we've seen it. Hell, we saw Scott Mitchell back in the 90s play 3 real good games, and he got paid for a decade off of that.
Yeah, here's why I think Mahomes is different. Kareem Hunt, we saw the back that he was last year. He's barely even been relied on at times this year. Sammy Watkins is tough to guard one-on-one. Tyreek Hill is such a dynamic down-the-field threat. And Travis Kelce is that possession guy. I just think they have so many pieces offensively. And when you look at Mahomes, it's not just a drop-back pocket passer. He can move the pocket. He can escape the rush. He can make plays with his legs. Yes, I think there's a period where he comes back down to earth. Obviously, he's not going to put up these type of numbers for his career, but they have too many weapons on offense to be able to stop and even put a dent in what this offense is doing. And even talking to Travis Kelce at the UCLA game this year where he was at, he was saying just where Mahomes is compared to Alex Smith. And Alex Smith has been a great quarterback in this league, a solid one for a long time. Mahomes is already surpassing that. I just think he's going to have a very, very good career.
Yeah, but Mahomes is so much more physically gifted than Smith. Smith was a guy that kind of had to get in there and learn how to play quarterback, and it took a few years. Mahomes is a guy that's got everything coming in, it looks like.
There was a report during his time at Texas Tech that there was a little wind at his back, but he threw a ball 85 yards. But to me, that's incredible for a quarterback to be able to throw a ball 85 yards in the air. but you see it every time he releases the ball. The deep balls are effortless. He can put velocity on it when he needs it. He's got the touch. And I think that's the trifecta. So many guys with strong arms don't have the touch when they need it. He can make every throw with every different type of arm angle.
Hey, I saw David Klingler in Wilmington throw the ball 92 yards once. I just never saw him in a regular season game complete a pass to a teammate. Brian, what's your take on Patrick Mahomes?
I think.
Are there any questions in your
think
mind?
guys. I think there's always questions with the young quarterback. You know, as you said, when defensive coordinators watch him, what do they find? I think there's always going to be questions to a certain extent. My thing is you watch him. He makes all the throws. He's, in my opinion, he just seems like a very smart quarterback. He does things really well in terms of reading defenses, getting the ball out, understanding, blitz checks. I know there was, I think in the Steeler game, you watched him make a check that you knew was a blitz check, and I mean, just was perfect. He just seems like he has all the tools, and obviously we're looking at a small sample size, but to me, I think he's a guy that's going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the league in the next 3 or 4 years, where everybody's just going to look and go, yeah, this guy is doing everything and got it all.
Yeah, and I know you like to run and shoot, all the fancy spread offenses, Brian. And we know that Texas Tech's put out a lot of quarterbacks with huge numbers out, and none of them have ever translated to the NFL, so that makes it even more impressive with him.
Yeah, it really does. And what's even more impressive than that is there's been so many quarterbacks at Texas Tech that have put up numbers, won games, done a lot of that stuff. He wasn't exactly a guy that was winning 10 games at Texas Tech. Now, granted, their defense, is a wet paper towel, but coming out, I know there were a lot of people that were impressed. There was a lot of naysayers. But when you watch him, even at Texas Tech, there was just something different about him. He looked like a guy that you could put in a pro-style system. There was a lot of questions with his footwork. Can he be under center? But let's look, the NFL has changed at a point where it's no longer, under center 60, 70% of the time. It's the opposite. So that's something to me that I think that people need to start transitioning away is the NFL is no longer an under center league. Yes, they do go under center. Yes, there's a time for it, but it's not like it used to be.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Tony, you have any parting words?
Yeah, I think there's really three things, and to piggyback off what we just talked about, the Patrick Mahomes thing, there was a game, I saw a stat this week, him and Baker Mayfield went off against each other in college. Mayfield threw for 545 yards, 7 touchdowns. Mahomes threw for 734 and 5 touchdowns. They play each other later this year. I think this is going to be one of the more exciting games that you're going to see based off of that. But the other two things for me, I think the Chargers are the most impressive one-win team right now. I think they have 2 tough losses against really good teams. I think they're going to be a team that's going to surprise some people. And as this season continues, I think it's interesting, the Le'Veon Bell aspect, what they're going to do, what teams are going to come forward. Because
did you hear the rumor today, Tony, about the Jets?
Yep. I've heard the Jets inquiring, but we were talking today a little bit. If you're the Packers and I'm sitting there, I would try to make a run at Le'Veon Bell for this year and pair him up with Aaron Rodgers or give him a weapon like that. But there's going to be a team that takes a chance on Le'Veon Bell. I think it's going to be a good chance because he's going to make any offense dynamic. Not as much as what Khalil Mack has done defensively with the Bears, but Le'Veon Bell is going to have a huge impact for a team at some point this year.
Yeah, maybe he can go to New England. Brian, any final words?
I would love to be able to watch an NFL game this year that the quarterbacks don't need to be laid down on bed and their feet massaged and probably still get a flag for that. So I would love to be able to see some old-time football.
Yeah. Me too. I remember Turkey Jones. was it Turkey Jones that picked Terry Bradshaw up and slammed him on his head, and it was a penalty.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. Well,
could you imagine a defensive end in today's game doing that to a quarterback? There would be flags being thrown from the press box. The fines would be astronomical.
They'd probably have a sniper shooting right in the middle of it to stop it from happening.
Probably. I mean, and like I said, I understand back when this all started, and people don't understand and don't realize this didn't start 5 years ago. This started back in the 90s. I can remember times where people going, I can't believe it.
Back in the 80s, I remember this stuff happening.
Yeah, but if you remember, in the 90s, it got real prevalent, and I still just remember ESPN. I remember watching Tagley was saying, we want to change these rules to protect, and at that time it was more about protecting the quarterback. We want to protect the quarterback without changing the way football is played. And when we look back now at what football was then compared to now, at some point the idealistic thoughts of doing this that maybe were sound has turned into an unrealistic crap that we see now. It's so unrealistic. It's not football.
Yeah, see, Tony's too young to remember real football. How old are you, Tony? Late 20s?
No, 32.
32. You might be old enough then. That was 20 years ago.
I remember some of it.
Yeah, you remember the back end of
but,
it.
But here's the thing. Even Tony at UC, I can remember some games where he was playing where I can remember when they played at Pitt. It seems like that game was. I keep thinking there was snow in that game. It was snowing. Yeah. I remember him taking a hit in that game that there was no flag on. That today in the NFL, there would have been flags, fines. Somebody would have probably come up and propped Tony up to make sure he was. It's different.
Oh yeah,
it changed.
Well, the thing that's real scary is this: in high school football. You know, you're going to get quarterbacks beat up a lot more than you do in the NFL.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's the thing is college isn't adapting that rule yet. It's just it's crazy at that level that you're seeing it. And like I said earlier, now it's going to become a thing where anytime a quarterback gets touched, he's going to fall, and there's going to be that moment where the ref has to make a split-second decision, and they're being coached. These refs are. To throw the flag when there's indecision because they want to over enforce the rule, and it's ruining the game. Every time there's a big play, you're waiting to see if there's another flag. It's a constant, and it's crazy because we talked about this week 1 on the show, and now we're talking about going into week 4, and it hasn't gotten any better. If anything, it's gotten worse, and that to me is a scary thing with this league.
Yeah, it's turned into special teams where when your team gets a big return, you just hold your breath and look back and hope there's no flag.
Right. Oh, yeah.
You know, and then last night, of course, you had him pick a flag up for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which shows the NFL's still fixed for the Steelers, Schmidt.
No, I wish that were true. They had.
Watch Super Bowl 40. The Seattle Seahawks will tell you how true it was. That was fixed.
I mean, how many penalties Pittsburgh have left? I mean, they lead the league in penalties, and it gets a little bit embarrassing to watch sometimes with the way Pittsburgh plays right now. So I really
Darius Hayward Bay last night. He's real lucky they won that game because I don't understand how Mike Tomlin just didn't run over and at least scream at him for a little bit because that was about as selfish a play as you could ever have.
I agree. I know myself watching it. I thought, man, I would have gone off on him. And that's the problem, and it's been the problem is we see. Look, Tomlin is a player's coach, and people talk about him being a motivator, but at the same time, I don't feel like he has control of that locker room. I don't feel like he has control of that team. For a guy that's supposed to be a defensive head coach, our defense is terrible. They pushed Dick LeBeau, quote unquote, into retirement, and since he's gone, the defense has gotten 20 times worse. I just don't understand. I don't. I know people want to talk about it, Super Bowl and da-da-da. He went and won a Super Bowl with Cowher's guys. Let's be honest. So I really do struggle with him. I try to be somewhat. Yeah, that was a decade ago. Yeah. So, it's one of those things that I think that there has to really start being some checks and balances as far as the ownership to look at him. But and I know people say, okay, well, if you get rid of him, who are you going to get? Who's better than he? Who's better out there? And that's a whole nother debate that you could get into.
I have a suggestion. I think Marvin Lewis would look good in black and gold.
Nope.
Let's swap. Let's just swap.
Yeah. No, I don't want to swap. I don't really want Mike Tomlin, but I definitely don't want Marvin Lewis.
We're not swapping.
Marvin used to coach with the Steelers. He could come back home. It would be great.
Nope. If I have to have the two, I'll keep what I have, but I really don't want either one.
I would take Lewis over Tomlin, maybe. I don't think either one of them are very good.
Nope.
I would love to have John Harbaugh over all of them, though.
Well, imagine John Harbaugh in a Pittsburgh or John Harbaugh in a Cincinnati. Completely different situation.
Well, yes. Number one, he would have a lifetime contract. Never have to worry about getting
Number
fired.
two, he probably he would have won a Super Bowl in Cincinnati or Pittsburgh with some of the talent that's
I
in
can
there.
tell you this. I think Marvin Lewis wins the Super Bowl in Cincinnati if Andy Dalton doesn't get hurt towards the end of 2015, though.
I don't know. I just
Tony,
never been
that
impressed.
was a pretty good team.
Yeah, it was a good team. Until Andy Dalton does it in the playoffs, I just can't. I can't say
Tony,
that he's a quarterback that's going to win the Super Bowl.
If you look at his first 3 or 4 attempts in the playoffs, I don't think the Bengals were ever a better team. The Colts game, hell, they had who was the little Rex Burkhead playing tight end? The Texans games, the Texans were just a better team than the Bengals. The Chargers one is the only one I would really hold against him. But the best team he had to take to the playoffs was 2015, and that's a team that wins with A.J. McCarron playing quarterback if Jeremy Hill could just hold on to the ball. And McCarron was horrible in that football game. It always freaked me out when everybody said, well, A.J. McCarron almost won us a playoff game, but A.J. McCarron also got shut out for the first 3 quarters of that game.
Right.
If they have any offense at all, they would have won that game.
Yeah, to me, there's between the two head coaches, there's too many similarities that I don't like. The untimely penalties, the lack of discipline at times. Pittsburgh's on pace for 197 penalties this year, which is unbelievable. We've seen the perfect issues with Marvin in Cincinnati. There's a lot of similarities that you draw from, and I know people say, well, they're players, coaches, but at some point you got to get control of your locker room, and I think both of those guys better get control of that sooner rather than later.
Well, and it's going to be ugly when Vontaze Burfict's finally allowed to play again, because I don't think that's going to go well.
No.
With the rules the way they are, I like Vontaze Burfict, but you put him in 1978, he's a Hall of Famer. You put him in today, they may arrest him at some point. But he's still better than anything the Pittsburgh Steelers have, because I hate the Steelers, Schmitty. Have I told you that lately? All right, guys, we're going to wrap this show up. And in a few weeks, we'll get to debate that, as both teams will probably be 3-3 and can't get out of their own way. But, all right, remember you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. I do want to bring up one thing. Every Wednesday night, we'll have the Indiana basketball show with myself, 1981 national champion Steve Risley, and a man who played there the last 4 years, Colin Hartman. Make sure you check that out. Tomorrow night, me and Brian Schmidt will be back with Robert Drummond, 4-time CFL Grey Cup winner for the CFL Weekly Show. And Thursday night, we'll have Inside Boxing Weekly with John Einreinhofer and Jeremiah Pricer. So make sure you check all those shows out. Follow us at Grueling Truth. And once again, listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and everywhere else. So for Tony Pike, Brian Schmidt, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.